Hey everyone, welcome back to Mayday. Today's show is a beefy one as I'll get into the Angel Hernandez retirement announcement, discuss the Jorge Lopez situation with John Boy Media's own Jolly Olive, and finish up with a discussion of Seth Lugo's Cy Young bid through his first 12 starts. It's going to be a good one. Let's get into it. All right, it is good to be back here on the show. This one is coming out a little bit faster. I am proud to announce that I have brought on a new friend to help, get these shows out a little bit quicker, do some of the mastering and the voice editing. So don't even be surprised if it even sounds a little bit better audio quality for you moving forward. This guy's a pro. So big shout out there as well. I am very excited to work with. And you know what? Screw it. I'm going to work with Michael. Michael is editing this. Michael, we love you, man. Even though you haven't even done one, I'm sure it's going to be great. Let's, before we get into our topics of the day, I kind of want to touch on some other stuff on the show. Add a little bit of a news segment here at the beginning. And there's two names in the news that you need to know. Actually, there's a few, but a couple of them are going to get bigger segments on today's show. So let's just touch on these names, and this is going to be the shorter version. The two names for this week's show are Ronald Acuna Jr. and Jeremiah Estrada. One for something good and one for something not as good. Anyone who is following baseball closely knows Ronald Acuna just went down with another ACL tear, this time in his left knee, which is the opposite knee of the one he had surgery on in 2022. So, it was 2021. Yes, I know that. I was there. I was part of that process. I was on the team that they were beating pretty consistently to get there. Tears his ACL. This is terrible news for baseball fans in general, but obviously the Braves. They are in second place in the NL East, and they're kind of losing ground to the Phillies. Phillies are a little bit running away with it. I understand that we're not even 60 games into the season yet, but it is not, you never want to be in a deficit if you can avoid it. And this is a kind of uncharted territory, especially for the guys who've been on this team for a while. And the guys who are on there now have only known success. So it's going to be a unique time of adjustment for them. I think we know that Ronald's going to do the work and get back. But what does this mean for them? It's going to make that coming back in that division even harder than it was. They're probably going to be in the market for some outfielder help. I don't know if they're throwing Zach Short out there or what right now, but the Tommy Phams of the world, the Kevin Pillar's, going to get him and seeing if you can platoon and just get some quality, veteran presence out there might be a stopgap, but unfortunately there's not a lot available. So they're just going to have to keep going without him and try to get the job done. But the one time they had to do this before, they won a World Series. So yeah, reigning MVP. Yeah. One of the most impressive seasons anyone's ever seen. You don't want to lose that guy, but they are a team that can handle a loss like that better than most. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But I don't know I think it might just be the Phillies year. And I think after our last conversation with Mark on the last episode of the show, and especially with some of the drama that is happening now in Flushing, the Mets aren't going to be up there competing with them. Which honestly, I don't know why that's even being discussed, because that should have never been an expectation for the beginning of the year. They were, I was always under the opinion that an 81 season would have been considered a W based on how they pulled back on a lot of the spending and a lot of the ways that they've approached it too. So, I don't think they're coming. I think this is a two-horse race, but that one of the horses just took a little bit of a blow, and so we'll see what happens. We'll see how they bounce back, but we'll see if Austin Riley can pick things up a little bit, pick up the slack. Olsen gets his power stroke back. There's some topics we're going to actually get into on rates and barrels, which probably will be released by the time this is released as well. So if you're wondering about a deeper dive into the future of the Braves and kind of maybe what the difference is between this year and previous years in terms of success. They're still 10 games over 500. It's hilarious that I'm even saying this, but it's different. It's a different feeling. They don't feel as dominant as they were, and they've had two very major, losing your ace and losing arguably your best player. Arguably, he was the MVP last year. He is their best player. Both in the same year for the whole time. Not ideal. So it's going to be a test. But we're going to go in depth there. So go check out that episode too on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts. The other name, Jeremiah Estrada, is in the news for a very positive reason, a very interesting reason that I am so fired up is getting any attention at all because I feel like these things never do. He is currently on a 13 strikeout streak as a reliever. This is over 3 different outings. You got the first out of the third or the first outing. I don't even know if it was a fly ball. It just wasn't a strikeout. And then he struck out every single out since. That is, he struck out 5 in those 2 innings. He struck out 5 in the next inning and 2/3, and he struck out the side in his last outing. And he's currently still on the streak. It is the record. He already has it, and all he's going to do is extend it, which is super cool. It's the most in a row by anybody over any period of time. And the other record, the most in a row in a game, is actually Tyler Alexander, of all people, who was with the Tigers at the time. Honestly, I can't remember where he is now, but he did come in relief one time and struck out 10 straight guys in 4 innings, which was one of the most surprising and outrageous things I've ever seen. But, these guys are, when you're dialed in, you're dialed in. What can I say? He seems like he's having a great time. These are things that I feel like no one ever pays attention to, especially with like relievers. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I'm going to. I once struck out 8 in a row, and people were just starting to pay attention, and that was over 3 outings in 2019. But it was funny because when I had that eight strikeout streak, Tyler Duffy also struck out 8 in a row, and they overlapped a little bit. Like his outing the day before, or whatever, ended it, and then mine ended the next day. But we were dialed, but I just feel like no one even noticed. But then again, we were on the Minnesota Twins, and we didn't quite get the notoriety nationally that other teams did. So, I mean, I'm not bitter. You're bitter. So those 2 guys, main topics of the news. But let's just get right into the main segments here of the show. Angel Hernandez finally calls it quits. And I say finally because I think this is just something people have been just like jokingly and then not so jokingly as of late been calling for him to be just done, like just to kind of relinquish his power, maybe just kind of move on. And you know what? I fully understand these things. I get it. This announcement actually sparked an idea for a video because I'm going to do a deep dive, and I'm currently scripting it and working on it. So expect this video in the next week or 2 on YouTube because I kind of want to do it really, really highly detailed and entertaining for you. But really deep diving into umpiring and the evolution of it over the last 20 years and like if it's actually gotten worse or not and all that kind of stuff. So I want to know actually how bad is Angel? It'll be more in depth, obviously, in that video, but I want to touch on some points here, and I'll be using a website called umpscorecards.com. It's those any of the scorecards you've seen on like Twitter or on Instagram. This is where they come from. It's basically the analytics stats website for umpires and how good they're doing, and then it ranks them amongst everybody else. And one thing that's super interesting about Angel is, like, yes, according to this, he is below average on pretty much everything. He is in the bottom half, right? He's in the bottom half, but there's only a couple things that he's the worst at, and I think that explains why he's always so much in the public-facing sphere here. The public is always noticing what he's doing because it's about how he does it. Now, let me just be clear too, and let me give credit where credit's due. Angel Hernandez may be, people have really strong feelings about him, but I will say of umpires that non-baseball fans can name, he might be the only one in history. Now, that could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing. I think he's more infamous than he is famous, but he he is known, and he has grown the game in that way. He has created some spectacle that has got people to pay attention to what's going on, and that has value whether or not you like how it's done or not. It does. And he is a nice guy. He's a really nice person, a caring person, for the most part, a kind person. I've never heard anyone say that he's had an unkind word to say about anybody, which actually, like, the fact that he is so personable and so, like, willing to engage people might account for one of the main things that he is bad at. That could be a big reason why he struggles in the certain way that I'm about to talk about. And according to umpscorecards.com, he is in the bottom 2% in leverage, meaning he basically his calls impact the game or in leverage, like swing a game one way or the other. Like, he's the worst at that. He's the worst at impacting a game in leverage situations with his calls. That tracks with the timing and the anger and the vitriol attached to the things. Now, you need to understand, with leverage comes emotion. There is a certain level of pressure, not only on the players, but like the fans are nervous. The players are nervous. The coaches are nervous. The commentators get a little like tight or whatever. Do you know who else gets tight or nervous or just like or feels one way or the other? Umpires. Because they are the ones that need to get things correct or not correct, or they have a big role to play in the game. And I think that affects Angel more than it affects anybody. And that could be a reason he's probably a pretty emotional guy. Like, I know I'm getting a little deep here, but I think just judging by conversations guys have had with him, like how honest and like, I don't know, authentic he is when he talks to you, like it immediately, that's like that's different. 'Cause, you know, it's not as calculated as other people, which is weird to be an umpire. So I think he gets caught up by the moment, and that would account for why when he gets caught up in the moment, he like maybe doesn't realize that he is either rooting for or is against a certain situation happening or a certain outcome, and then it's like becomes self-fulfilling prophecy by his calls. That happens more often than not. It's not always happening, but the big ones to kind of drive his average down. So it's 0.18 runs of impact per call. Per call. That's a fifth of a run per call. That's really high, and that puts him at the top of the list in terms of being bad in leverage. Then the second one is favor. It's a favor rating. Like how biased does a guy get? And certain guys are really good at it. Some aren't as good. So this is about consistency. And I think that's one of the biggest critiques of his umpiring career is how much he swings and his favor swings. But this is very old school. This is bias related, and it's very human, but you have to be very purposeful and very conscious of the fact that you're being biased in order to build a situation where you aren't as biased. And I think that's another thing that Angel does more than other people. He gets caught up, and then he develops a bias and doesn't check them very well. And in a game where you're supposed to be objective, that is kind of the antithesis of your job. But at the same time, it's a sport. Sports are like, you know, they are an emotional situation. So like, what are we? You know, there's a balance there, and everyone has like the favor per game thing. Everyone has a rating here. Like nobody has a 0. No one has a perfectly unfavorable to either side. But his is, you know, I think he's third in the league in the highest swing. So if he likes one side more than the other, the chances that if he likes the guys on them or he respects the veterans, it could be a combination of both. You know, like we talk about Greg Maddux all the time and how he was able to pitch and blah, 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 blah. But in reality, you know, he was able to manipulate the ball at an elite level, but he also was very good at creating bias with umpires in his favor, making them believe that because he threw that pitch there, that it is a strike. Like that was the secret sauce back then in the 90s and the 2000s. Being able to do that would show up in runs of favor per game. This stat would show that what umpires are manipulated easier by either guys' names or guys' reputations or whatever, or just their personal relationship. They're sitting there talking to umpires. Umpires are talking to catchers all day. They have relationships with players. A lot of them try not to, but it's almost impossible. We see them all the time. We know their names. We try to know their names because you're supposed to, but also it gives you a little edge. If you say, "Hey, how are you today?" and you say their name and they know you know their name, the chances that they'll subconsciously give you a call in your favor goes up by its nature. It just does. We'd like to say it doesn't, but it just does. They're human beings. No matter, there's no amount of training that would get them to be robots. It just doesn't exist, and that's part of the gamesmanship of the game. That's part of baseball IQ. That's what's so interesting for me. So he seems to be one of those people that those moves have worked on very well in the last 33 years that he was an umpire. And that's it. At the end of the day, he was bottom 20% in consistency. Yeah, he was bottom 20% in accuracy. But he was like 73rd percentile, top 25%, or top 27% in expected accuracy. Now, I don't truly know how you can do expected numbers. It's probably balanced versus the rest of the group. So, he is being put in positions to make the calls, but your accuracy is going to go down when you are easily influenced by outside factors, which he is. And I think that's just it. I just think that is Angel Hernandez in a nutshell. That is just how he went through his career. He gets a little bit distracted sometimes too. There's times where he just didn't see it and he guesses, right? Especially since the replays came out. He just guesses. He guessed because he is retired. But I will say, I want someone to be locked in. There are better umpires, but he isn't the worst either. He's just the one you remember. He's he's an easy villain. But now that he's moving on, it's funny. I'm seeing the tone change. I salute Angel too for sticking with it this long and putting up with this much hate for this long. I couldn't have done it. I would have heard it and it would have bothered me. And so there's a certain fortitude there that needs to be mentioned as well. And I wish him the best moving forward in whatever he chooses to do. I'm sure he'll be around. I'm sure he's just probably going to be a desk job. I'm sure he'll probably still take some shifts doing the replay or whatever it is. But it was just time. He's older too. Take a break, man. 33 years in the major leagues. That is impressive. That is commendable, and that is worth a tip of the cap, regardless of what happened on the field. Because at the end of the day, it's a sport. In the words of LeBron James, it's just basketball, baby. It's just basketball. It is just basketball. And it makes you feel real bad in the moment. You're pissed off as a fan. You're pissed off as a player. But at long term, it all kind of just shakes out and works out the way it's supposed to. And it's entertainment at the end of the day, and that emotion is part of it. So once you have that realization, things get a lot easier. All right, I am proud to announce we are joined today by John Boy Media Zone and very successful baseball YouTuber, Jolly Olive, also a Mets fan. Jolly Olive, thank you for joining us, man. I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me on, Trevor. I appreciate it. This is the first time we've gotten to collaborate on something. I'm very excited about that. And now I can proudly say that there are two former Mets relievers that I do podcasts with.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wait, who's the other one?
Oh, the other one is Jerry Blevins.
Yeah, Blevins. Yeah, I knew that. Yeah, I knew
the
that.
Man.
I knew that. And, and you also talk to another Trevor a lot, who I also played with. So
exactly. There you go.
There's that. T1, as I call him. We haven't even spoken since we almost physically ran into each other at the All-Star game.
Oh, yeah. I was on Cloud 9 that day. I'm much more on Cloud 1 today. So.
that was a blast. Are you going to go to the All-Star games this year?
I believe there's a pack of John Boy Media people going. I will not be. I'm actually going to Europe on vacation for the first time in my life. I'm very excited.
Well, there you go. Congratulations on that. That is a good excuse. I will be going down there. It's going to be my first one as a full-time media member. Pretty excited about it.
That's huge.
So there's worse places to go than Dallas for sure.
Yeah,
well, there's been some news. And for the listeners, Jolly is a Mets fan. Very, very versed in the Mets. I know this is the second guest we've had on in a row that is a Mets fan that knows a lot about them. But we've had more news, and I would love to get into that. But first, I would like to ask you, what are you up to right now? I know there's a lot going on. You mentioned you were just on a podcast. This is a great time to what are the projects you've been doing lately? Just give me a little background, because the people who listen to this, if they don't already listen to your stuff, they will love it. And I want to make sure we do this before we get into the rest of it.
I appreciate that because usually that gets saved for the end. So it's nice to lead off with it. I do the Shea Station podcast with Jerry Blevins. We do Mets coverage. We haven't been the past couple weeks, actually, because we've been taking turns getting sick, but we're planning on having a big episode on Monday. Outside of that, I have my own YouTube channel where I kind of do video essay content. I just did the entire trade history of the Florida Marlins. It was a long, hard process, but I was really happy with the way it came out. So if either of those things sound interesting to you, definitely go check them out.
The trade history of the Florida Marlins. I didn't know I wanted to know about that until right now.
It's a long one.
Awesome. So yeah, go check it out. He does lots of, the video essay, the commentary type videos, the deeper dives, similarly to what I do. I'm currently working on one about umpires because of Angels' very gracious step back, which I already talked about in the show. So they've already gotten plenty of that. All right. Let me just recap the situation real quick. Yesterday, Jorge Lopez of the Mets in the bullpen. He is new this year. He struggled a little bit. He struggled the night before. You can tell he's a little frustrated. Disputes a check swing call with Ramon de Jesus, which anyone who has watched anything I've made recently knows that me and Ramon aren't on the best of terms either. So I totally understand that frustration. And they both kind of lose their minds, and he gets tossed from on the mound, which you never see. But then he throws his glove into the stands, which that probably wasn't the best decision, which all of this is a kind of thing on its own. But then we have the post-game interview, and Steve Gelbs asked the question, do you regret throwing your glove into the stands? He says no, which at that moment, it was literally 10 minutes before or whatever, right. Half an hour before. So he's like, no, I'm still pissed off. Like, he's very clearly pissed off. I don't blame him for saying no there. But then, he tried to give an explanation, and English is not his first language. He speaks fairly good English for the most part. Like, he can make himself understood generally. But this is one of those more nuanced things where you need a little bit of help. And he said something that sounded like I'm on the worst fucking team in the league, in the MLB, which I played for the Mets. So I knew what was happening in the public sphere there. So let's start here. What did you think when you first heard it?
So it takes a special character to willingly play for the Mets. I'm going to lead up with that. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of baggage that comes with the Mets organization. You know that firsthand. With all that being said, in Mets history, he's not the only pitcher to throw a glove into the stands. Older fans will know that Bobby Ojeda did it for the 86 Mets. Turk Wendell did it. So that particular image is not foreign. But with all that being said, it was kind of a culmination of building frustration in what has been a terrible month, a mimicked month from June 2023, a month that basically ended partially the Mets core that won 101 games. As for what happened in the postgame, there was a team meeting, which I'm sure we'll discuss later on. Those first initial quotes, you could tell in the video, he's still pretty hot, and understandably so. Say what you will about the quotes and the altercation, but the ejection itself was pretty bogus, in my opinion. And in a 9-3 game with one out to get for Mets pitching, that's the kind of thing you can let go. And they didn't let it go, and Lopez got tossed, and it was a whole mess. So it's tough because I've seen that kind of thing before. I've seen frustrations aired. It could have died there, and obviously it didn't. And I think that leads us to a larger discussion.
It obviously didn't. Yeah. And to be honest, I thought this was about, so I replied to the first video. This was before the game even ended. And I was just like, oh, look, Ramon, like, losing his mind immediately when he hears anything, which I've had those issues. I've never thrown out of a game, but I got close. The closest I've ever gotten was with him. And it was while I was on the Mets playing against the Braves. And I was just like, dude, what are you doing? And and he just, like, if you acknowledge him at all, he just loses it. So yeah, I didn't like the barking, throwing a guy out and just like making a big scene like that was just kind of, it was unnecessary. I'm just like, read the room, right? It's not about you. But that's neither here nor there. It didn't really end up being a big deal. The comments at the end, though, if what was portrayed to be said was said, that's a death sentence for being on the team. Obviously, he's at that point. You say something like that on purpose and clearly in order to be like, I can't do this whole thing here anymore. I need to go somewhere else, and this is the best way to do it. And frustration can take the best of you there. But now it's come out that it's funny the way he said it. It was almost like downtrodden. It wasn't like an angry thing. So he like I've been a bad teammate because he's cashed some runs in lately. It's funny. He has a 3.5 ERA. Like
he's actually been one of the better relievers in the pen. That's the whole thing.
He's been one of the best ones, and he's had a couple tough games. And he's one of those guys. I was the same way. This like there would be like 3 or 4 straight outings where I give up like 1 or 2, and then that would just inflate everything for the whole year. And then I'd go on a rattle off 15 straight scoreless and have to like be like, see, I'm good still. It's just the way it is. It's being a reliever. It's when you can avoid that. That's when you have the Aaron Loop 2021 years, right?
Oh, yeah, we need more of those.
Yeah, I think everyone would like more of those. That worked out for him, I'd say. But he says the things he says, and then it immediately comes out that he's going to be DFA'd. Now, I feel for him because I saw a look on his face, and this is a little bit, maybe even, I apologize if I'm getting a little bit deep here on you, but I saw a look on his face that I also had on my face last year, but I wasn't talking to the media. I was talking to my trainers.
Right.
And I was like, I can't like sort my thoughts out right now. I'm just like, it wasn't even about winning the games or anything. It was about like I felt like I was letting every single person around me down and my family, like everything. It felt like everyone was being failed, and no one was being failed, really, just myself, but it just felt that way. And he just looks overwhelmed, like it's a lot. And I've been in that spot. I was in that spot at times in New York. I didn't know what to do. I had to like ask people for help, and we took care of it behind the scenes because you have to go ask for that help. Like you have to, like they're not, it's just the nature of baseball. Everyone needs to be tough. Right. So, that's one thing that struck me. I was like, oh, like he's like trying to figure out if he's just going to like, dagger his career or not right now because he's that mad. And to be a Met, it's tough. It's really tough to do the Mets because, as you know, it's skies falling. It's very, very deep valleys and very, very high peaks when things are going well there, right? And
yeah, I mean, that's a fan base that lives and dies by the team. They're in it for every single pitch. And the players, I assume they feel that in a very heavy way, especially with the presence of social media and the team's recent success up until last year. So it's a huge weight to bear for someone like Jorge Lopez.
Yeah, and he's new. This is new for him. He's never had to do this. Like it's just a new beast. It's like there in Philadelphia. Like if those are the 2 places that you have to kind of be mentally prepared to go to and be ready for. So what the DFA happened. He's come out and clarified a few times. Steve Gelb said that he asked later and he like said yes, doubled down, but it didn't seem really like it. And I like Steve too. I know Steve well too. I don't think Steve's doing anything that's like nefarious or trying to get him in trouble or anything. He just wants clarification. So not a great situation overall, but this is a trend, and you've been here for the whole trend. You know all about the team. Hell, you know about all the Marlins trades now, so you know probably everything. This so even since I was there, and I know about like the Jason Vargas and the reporter about raccoon and rat, freaking the thumbs down, there's things all of the time. And as a fan, like what is your perspective on that? What does it feel like? What is it about the ecosystem here that like makes these things so happen constantly? Like what do you see as a fan? Because I have my theories, but like fans have different perspectives, and I'm always interested, and I think that you are good at explaining them. So what's your theory?
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because everything is compounded moment to moment. Like if the check swing call goes Lopez's way and he punches out his last batter, then the inning ends. He doesn't get tossed. There's no commotion whatsoever, and he's probably on the team today. But that's really not how things have ever gone in Mets baseball. They live by Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong for this team at certain moments. And I think it is something of an organizational failure. And I don't want to rag on, the first year manager or the first year president of baseball operations who are inheriting things, not necessarily building them yet. But this was an incredibly avoidable situation. I think it's a situation that many teams would not have run into if they encountered the very same circumstances. You can watch the clips and you can make judgments for yourself. In fact, when I first saw the clip of the quote, I reached out to our socials team at John Boy Media and I said, "Are we absolutely sure that he said team, not teammate?" And they passed along the Gelb's confirmation and the DeComo confirmation. Those are two guys that I trust with any sort of Mets information. I'd say they're probably the two most trusted outlets of Mets reporting. And, that's kind of all the confirmation I needed. And from that perspective, and I think the aftermath of this really set in that the entire situation could have been very avoidable, was the fact that Jorge Lopez, I think, was at an emotional high. I think the team meeting maybe exacerbated that a little bit as well, with those emotions running so high, with their recent crushing losses, basically building to this moment. I think if the Mets are playing 500 baseball in May and they're not blowing games constantly late in games, not only Jorge Lopez, but the entire bullpen doesn't feel like they are the reason this is all happening. And I think you can speak on this as a player as well. When the team struggles, I feel like players individually wear it sometimes, especially when it comes to be their turn and they struggle as well. But you win and you lose as a team. And I think the Mets failed to get the back of their player in the situation as well. And that resulted in, I think, the worst possible scenario, where it wasn't a situation of reprimanding or a situation of this can't happen again. It was, this will never happen again because he's now off the team. And it really is a bummer, because if you look into Jorge Lopez's background, many people have nothing but great things to say for him. His son is going through an own ordeal right now, waiting for a transplant. I believe it was his birthday yesterday as well when this happened, which probably compounded, like I said before, all the emotions of the event. And that just goes to show you kind of what Mets fandom is: a series of moments that heightened something to make it much, much worse than it actually needed to be.
That very well put. It's very it's so interesting too, because there's other weird things like Alan, the interpreter, probably because the meeting just ended, he didn't know he could go back in yet, and it just kind of started. I bet you just like a weird timing thing happened where it's like it just didn't, he didn't know he was ready to go back in, and then they were just already talking to him, and that little thing could, lost in translation with high emotions, leads to a guy no longer being on the team. And another thing is, like, 25 other teams, that same exact thing happens, right? It's probably not reported as quickly as it was, and he's probably not DFA'd immediately. It would probably be an internal, like, hey, we're going to put him on leave, or he's got some stuff going on, he needs to deal with it, whatever. Like, it wouldn't be, but like in New York, man, it's just like, nope, he's gone. It's over. Like, your one chance is over. And that sucked to see, but like at the same time, like, the hands are tied. For example, here's a great one, and this was this is still something that sticks in my teeth, and I've always liked Sandy Alderson, for example, but there was the time with the thumbs down controversy where a memo was put out on an off day about us as players from our president of baseball before he talked to us, and he put it out and said we were in the wrong and the fans should, be able to do what they want. He was right, obviously, like, he is right, but we didn't have the opportunity to talk to him beforehand. Like, there was no acknowledgement of like, hey guys, come on. Like, it was just kind of like, oh, you guys don't matter. I have to deal with this. And it's just a unique thing that you have to do stuff like that there. Like, you have to show that you're going to do something immediately. And that, as a player, is very, very hard, because you don't feel like we felt like there was no one between us and all the noise ever. Like, it was Francisco Lindor, actually. He was the one standing in front of everybody and explaining everything all the time. And he's like, I'm like, dude, you're not our manager, man. Like, you're playing. You're tired. You just played you played every game. Maybe someone else should do it. And that was just something you have to, that it's just not like that other play. There's like, maybe it's probably New York Yankees, the Phillies, and the Mets, like, where it's to that level where they have to do something. They have to, and the pressure is there to do it. And that for me, that was one thing I always struggled with. I'm like, guys, people make mistakes, and we need a little bit of grace, but there's just not a lot of wiggle room. There's a lot less room for error, and it's like you mentioned before, when your valley of your season lines up perfectly with the teams, it's so much to handle. And you just mentioned stuff that I didn't know about. Like you have a child that's going through some stuff. It's hard enough just to even think about baseball at all. Right.
And you mentioned a little bit about, the Alderson situation. The communication ladder didn't funnel through the players. In this scenario where Lopez says his quote, it's misinterpreted, it's spun a certain way, or he did say it, whatever side you want to take, because I wasn't there and I don't know. But what we do know is that when he was asked to clarify and he doubled down, this was after a person with knowledge of the situation said that Lopez was already told that he was DFA'd. So if that was the plan in place, or even if it wasn't, the fact that it wasn't communicated to him before he spoke to media likely heightened the emotions and likely made him kind of think, what's the difference? If I'm getting cut anyway, I might as well, go out guns blazing at this point. And again, I'm not saying that this better communication might have avoided the situation entirely, but I certainly think it would have helped. And it's tough because I really do think Carlos Mendoza at certain areas has been doing a great job in his first year as manager. This is a tough gig, dude. And he's really getting thrown into the fire with everything that's happened in this month, the absolute circus that's going on with this team, that things like that might slip through the cracks. And it's a learning lesson, I think, for a lot of people in that organization, a lot of proven professional veteran executives and people in charge, that this was a mistake. And whether you want to blame Lopez or the Mets, it was a situation that didn't need to happen.
Yeah, of course it didn't. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. One little B question here on the side. Do you believe, and this is an interesting thing because I've had my back and forth, not really back and forth, my backs, and then just kind of like later there might be a fourth with Frank the Tank, right? Frank,
sure.
Frank thinks I hate him. I don't hate Frank the Tank at all. Like
really?
I think Frank's awesome. Actually, I love that guy, especially now. But like, when things like this happen, right? And Frank's just a good example because he'll tell you, he's like, he knows what his brand is. It's get mad, right? Get mad about things.
Of course. Yeah.
And he does it. He's one of the best there is in the game at it. So got to give him props for that. But when that happens and when there's a lot of people around, sometimes when you're used to doing it, you start looking, right? And so anything, like once it's out there that it is a way that allows you to get revved up about it, if it comes out that it actually quite wasn't that way, it's hard to it's hard to let go of what you were already thinking. And I feel that sometimes because sometimes we jump the gun a little bit because it's New York, baby. You got to get it out. You got to get it out fast or someone else is going to do it. We're on the internet. So, like, so, do you think there is an element of that too? Sometimes we're like, oh, this would be a great thing to go. And we don't quite think about implications long term, and then we try to throw it out there, and then we're like, we can't really backpedal now, but we don't really have to. Sometimes I feel like that happens. It's happened a couple times, even when I was there. Not all the time. Let me be very clear. Like it's not. There are not people doing this on purpose all the time, but sometimes we get a little excited because it's kind of the LOL Mets is an identity at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of two things. One is just standard age of information, like be first, don't be best, and like that kind of thing. When you're the first on something, whether it's a reaction or a bit of news, whatever it is, it'll get reactions. If it's brand new information, like people pouncing on the Lopez quote, getting it out first, and making sure they got the most clicks on what is a pretty ludicrous post game interaction. The other thing with Mets fandom in general, and Frank is an interesting one to bring up because this is kind of a little bit how he made himself, with these reactions and stuff like that, is that the players say, like, I don't care who you are, you're a person, you have an iPhone, you check it, you may even vanity search your own name, and you know what? That's okay. Whatever. Do what you got to do. The fact is, when you say something or tweet something or write something about a player, positive or negative, it's going to be seen. And I think that was an important lesson for me, going from being a Mets fan my whole life and enduring, season after season of losing baseball and off the field fiascos, to becoming someone who works in baseball media, that these things have weight. When you're openly not attacking players might be a too strong of a word, but panning players and commenting on their behavior or assuming what about their day to day, it can be a very damaging thing, and it's only magnified in New York. And for someone like Jorge Lopez, who I'm going to make assumptions here, but I assume that playing in Baltimore and Kansas City and Minnesota is a very different stratosphere to playing in New York. And maybe the noise of a couple blown games got to him. Maybe it was a familial situation as well. But it's true that when you put on the blue and orange uniform, you do wear a certain amount of baggage that comes with it. And that's why I really, really try to endlessly support the guys that are committed here on long deals, because year after year of this kind of thing, it'll weigh on you, man. I mean, the 2022 is a terrific season. I think a lot of guys played really well, and it was a really fun time to be a fan. And what's funny is a lot of new people, a lot of friends that I had who didn't really care about baseball got into the Mets that year. And the first thing I always said to them was, it's not always going to be like this. This is very, very unique. It's a lot of fun. Enjoy it. Let's go to as many games as we can, but it is not going to be like this. And 2 years later, a lot of those friends who got into baseball for the Mets are currently no longer into it. And it's not a secret why.
Yeah, that very well put. That it's one of those things. The way I think about it is, just remember, if you were a person, for whatever reason, saw something written about you, or just like criticizing or just commenting on something and maybe isn't fully right, the urge to defend yourself is overwhelming. I can tell you right now, for some people it's easier than others, but your best thing, don't look at it. And the by far the best thing, do not vanity look up your name. Learn that one early. I used to do it. I did it when I was young, but like Twitter became a thing. I stopped doing that, and I'm glad I did, but it was hard. It was hard. So just remember, like, it can be exhausting. And I always say, like, if you want, you don't have to sit there and just be like, come on, honey. Like, they're your kids. But like,
yeah,
I understand, but do what you want to do. But like, just remember, at some point, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's just not going to be helpful. And maybe that if you really want to see better baseball, you could help a little bit if you want. You don't have to, yes. But just as long as you're aware of it, I'm good with the fence. Okay, the last thing, I know we went a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I want to end on a good note, and I'm going to give you a very hard task right now.
Okay.
Give me one hopeful thing that you've seen from the Mets this year, something that is gives you hope for the future. Give me one positive thing that you like about this team.
That is a great question, and I think that's a nice note, because the thing that I think a lot of people say when they talk about the team this year is how are they bad? Because there's a lot of talent on this team, young and more proven talent. The thing for me is that I think the brightest spot for me was our catcher, Francisco Alvarez, who unfortunately went down with injury 2 weeks into the season and is working his way back. The glimpses of potential we see from him at 21 years old, in terms of him, even injured, being out there every single day in catchers meetings, watching BP, all this stuff, rushing early to get back, get healthy. That is the kind of thing that is not taught, but is kind of born with a little bit. You've been given that through your years of baseball. And the fact that he is so young and so talented, and one of the few catchers that was able to throw out people this year, and he hits the way that he does, he is the next step forward, I think, for this team, because there's a lot of questions of who's going to be here after the deadline. Like Pete Alonso is potentially on the table now with how poorly things have gone. There's basically only 3 guys on this team that I can guarantee will be here in August. Francisco Alvarez, in my opinion, is one of those guys, and I think that he is going to lead the way on a new era of Mets baseball. He's going to need help for sure. He's going to need, supplemented talent, but I think that the Mets can put a lot of eggs in the Francisco Alvarez basket.
Yes, get this Jalen Brunson a Josh Hart. For sure.
Well put.
I agree. I'm sorry, I know that's probably pretty tender, but I mean, come on, that was the best Knicks team.
Come on, yeah, that's the.
Come on, you got to take a little bit of a W. They were good.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're going to be good for tomorrow, next year too. So I'm in.
I hope so.
Suck.
Don't
Anyway,
say that so confidently. All right.
You know what? I'm hopeful. I'm going to keep putting the positive juju out there. I agree fully with the Alvarez. I think he's a superstar in the making, and he's one of those guys who can hit and be great defensively. And I'll be honest, when I first met him, I didn't know if he was going to be great defensively or that he was really into that. It's clear that he is, and he has come. It is incredible. Just the work he's done is incredible.
Absolutely.
He's impressive. It's the real deal. I saw it behind the scenes. It's the real deal. That kid is incredible. I hope he gets back soon. All right. Well, that's what I have, Jolly. I appreciate you, man. Thank you for coming, having a pretty candid conversation with me. That was very enlightening. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Trevor, this was awesome. I'm kind of glad we went long. That was a good conversation.
And finally, let's talk about this year's, for the most part, biggest surprise, I think, in the pitching category, as Seth Lugo recently in the last 2 years moved back into the starting rotation, a guy who's been around for 9 seasons and pretty much half and half in the reliever role and the starting role, which is kind of unheard of, has come back and he's put together a season so far that I just don't know how you don't have him in the front as the front runner for the AL Cy Young at this moment, because it's been truly impressive. Though the strikeout numbers aren't insane, the pitching, the quality and the execution. He's got a 1 WHIP. He's got a 1.72 ERA. He is 9-1 for a team that won 56 games last year. 56 games last year. They won over 30 already. So the Kansas City Royals have turned around and become a contender again very quickly, year over year. And Seth Lugo is a major reason for that, with his veteran presence. I know Seth really well. I played 2 years with him, had lots of conversations around pitching, and I'm just so happy to see this happening for him. One, because it lines up a lot with the conversations we had, and a lot of the frustration around being a reliever was not being able to use his arsenal the way he wanted to use it, and it seems like he has developed that this year. Really quickly though, let's just dive in a little bit to where this success is coming from. And one glaring thing when I pull up his Baseball Savant page, which baseballsavant.com is what I use a lot for front-facing data and just to figure out how guys are doing. And then when I want to go a little deeper, I go into my True Media account. If you were ever interested in that, please come check out my live show on Twitch and YouTube every Monday morning, 8 a.m., and the links will be in the description below too if you want to check that out. But that is 8 a.m. Pacific time on Monday mornings. We're doing a live show and we're getting deep dives in there too. So if you want to do this live, go there. But Seth throws 8 pitches. Yeah, you heard me right. 8 pitches, none of which he throws over 23.8% of the time. So we talk about mixing. We talk about guys, starting pitchers needing more than 2 pitches. We deception, needing to mix it up, needing to command the zone, all these things. Seth Lugo is doing all of those things. He throws a 4-seamer. He throws a sinker. This is a 23.8% on the 4-seamer, 22.2% on the sinker. So basically flip the coin if a fastball is coming, and then you have the other 6 pitches to worry about. He has the highest spin rate curveball and break curveball in the major leagues that he's thrown 15% of the time. If you're wondering what exactly highest spin rate means or the biggest breaking curveball means, let me just put this in context. It is almost 60 inches of drop, which is top 1%. That is 14% higher than average. That's 7.4 inches higher than the average curveball in the league, thrown at 79.5 miles an hour, which is what he throws it at. And the horizontal movement is 14.5 inches, which is 3.9 inches bigger than average, at 36% more. So he's above average by a lot on his curveball. But that's not the only one he throws. That is not the only one he throws. Also, just really quickly to touch on the spin on that curveball, the average spin on that curveball is 3,317. So 3,317 spins per minute, rotations per minute, RPMs. That is insane. I've never thrown a pitch remotely close to 3,000. Most people can't hit 3,000. He does it on the reg, and he does it with not only his curveball, but also his slurve. Yes, he throws a slurve. Actually, let's talk about all the breaking balls. He throws a curveball. He throws a slider. He throws a slurve, and he throws a cutter, and he throws a sweeper. He throws 5 breaking balls, all that is like a gradual, progression from bigger and slower to smaller and shorter. So in order, from hardest and shortest to biggest and slowest, we have the cutter, followed by the slider, followed by the slurve, followed by the curveball, followed by the sweeper. Sorry, flip that. Followed by the sweeper, followed by the curveball. So the curveball is the slowest, the cutter is the fastest. And every single one of these pitches adds a little bit more horizontal, a little bit more depth, and loses a little bit of velo. And they're all different grips. So he's built this arsenal of breaking balls that could be on its own an arsenal for a pitcher. Throwing 5 different breaking balls is incredible. He might be the only person that does it. And that is the biggest reason for his success, because the command of these things have all been really, really solid. He is throwing his curveball to the bottom part of the zone, just to the corner where he wants it to be. The slider slightly farther over to the corner and a little bit higher up, exactly where you'd want it to be. The slurve gets a little bit higher up than that because it has more horizontal. The sweeper is farther off the plate. It's a chase pitch because he wants it to move only horizontally and not vertically. And the cutter is right along the edge, right by where the slider is, just slightly higher because it has less vert. I know that was a lot. I know you're not going to be able to see it. I want you to take all that information and just be like, wow, that's insane. Because his command's great and throwing 5 breaking balls is insane. And as you can imagine, hitters are perplexed, especially because there is a changeup in there 6.5% of the time. And he's got 2 fastballs that he throws exactly half the time for each. But both combined is only 45% of the time. So you simply cannot eliminate a pitch with Seth Lugo. And that is why he gets such soft contact, which has been the name of the game for him this year. Let's talk about some run values now on Baseball Savant. They do. I won't get into the nuts and bolts of how run values are calculated, mostly because I don't know, but also that it changes from platform to platform. So everyone has their own little run value kind of situation, but it's a great visualization tool for telling you how something's performing. And basically, a positive run value is good, negative run values are bad. And if you had to guess which one of his pitches had a negative run value and guessed one, you'd be wrong because none of them do. The worst pitches he has performance-wise are the cutter at a 0 run value and the sweeper at a 0 run value. The sweeper actually was -1 until yesterday he started and threw a couple good ones, and guys didn't hit them hard, and now he's back at a 0. So all of his pitches have been effective, all of them. But his bread and butter have been the sinker with a 3 run value, the four seam with a 5 run value, curveball with a 5 run value, and the slider with a 4. Like those 4 pitches together have been insanely effective to the two of the 3 breaking balls. Or sorry, the 2 breaking balls both have over 30% whiff rates. Another great example of a wipeout pitch, a pitch that he can go to for a strikeout. And then he's got his sinker, and he's got his changeup, and he's got his cutter, and he's got the pitches that we call wrinkle pitches to get guys to hit soft contact. So he can miss bats and he can get soft contact, and his command has built him into the machine he is in. The last thing I will say about Seth Lugo, and I know I'm gushing, but he's never done anything like this. I was trying to talk to him about throwing like a slurve or a sweeper, changing up his slider as a reliever, and he was very stubborn about it because he was just like, I like my slider because I can throw it for strikes, but it didn't move much. He was using it as a cutter. He was using it a little bit too much, in my opinion, and now he's really leaned into the fact that he spins the ball better than anyone in the major leagues. You might as well just try all the breaking balls, see which ones you can do, and evidently he can do all of them. So why not? Which is awesome. But at the end of the day, the reason he's been so successful as a starter, and this is something that's going away, and I'm very happy for him because he has been around long enough, and he is enough of a veteran that he can have this conversation with the organization. I think they'll buy in that he wants to go deep into games. He wants to try to throw CGs every single time. He wants to get his 6-7 innings no matter what. He wants that to be his average, and so far so good. He is eating innings. At this rate, he is going to lead the league in innings, and it's probably not going to be very close. And if he leads the league in innings and maintains like a mid-2, even with the strikeouts, because he only has 66 strikeouts in 78 innings, even with not striking out a guy an inning, we could see a Cy Young going his direction because of his ability to execute and the way that he does it. He is truly pitching. So I highly recommend, if you can, I understand that most people aren't catching Royals games if they're not from the Kansas City area. But if you have the opportunity to watch this guy pitch, do it. It is a masterclass in pitching, and he represents a lot of a bygone era a little bit. A lot of things people are really craving in terms of pitchability and like dip diving and dodging them. So he does that better than anybody, and it's showing up in his results, and I'm happy as hell for him. But like, it's just fun, man. It's just pitching. After all of our conversations, it's awesome to see a lot of this stuff just happening because he now has the innings and the number of pitches in an outing to do it.